Now, most of us love watching some good acting. And if it's a good storyline that's well written, well, it can leave a lasting impact and impression on the audience. Today's guest joins us from Lethbridge. With me today is Deanna Storfie, and she's with Acting Up Drama and regularly performs one-person dramas. Welcome to Bridge City News, Deanna.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. Now, first off, can you tell us what is Acting Up Drama all about?
Really, I'm a storyteller. And so I love to bring the stories of faithful Christ followers of the past to life for people and audiences today, just to encourage their faith and also to encourage believers and non-believers alike, just with the goodness of God and his loving kindness that he has shown through the stories of what we would call even Christian heroes of the past.
Great. So could you give us just a snapshot of how you got started with this acting?
Well, it was quite a few years ago. I joined a drama ministry based out of Los Angeles called Covenant Players. And I was like fresh out of high school when I joined them, toured for 2 years. And I learned how to use drama as a means of communicating the gospel. And we traveled all over North America and just brought to life, using drama, just brought to life the gospel and the good news. And so when I settled here in Lethbridge a few years later, I just kept using what I'd learned there and used it in my church. And then I had kids, and I was just always writing dramas and teaching others how to use drama to communicate and to, to act and to bring plays to life. So I've been doing it for many years, many years. But when I was homeschooling my daughters, I ran across biographies of just people out of history, just ordinary people who had flaws and fears and doubts, and but how God used their ordinariness for His purposes. And so, as I read those biographies, I realized my friends in church had no idea about many of the stories, like Corrie Ten Boom, Gladys Aylward, John Newton, William Carey, Elizabeth Fry. And I'm reading, just eating up these stories, and I'm going, I'd love to use my gifts and abilities to share these stories with other people. And that's how it began.
Wow, that's very interesting. So why do you think that acting seems like a particularly effective way to communicate truth?
Well, it's a very, I would say, non-threatening way of bringing people into a story. Even a short skit or drama is really a short snippet of a story. And so it's not telling people what they should be doing, it's showing them what this truth looks like. And then people take from it what they need to out of it. And so, yeah, so we can sit there and watch a drama or a movie, and you'll get something different than I will. That's the great aspect of drama and story.
Right, it's really like similar to looking at a piece of art on the wall and how different viewers will appreciate a different aspect of a painting, let's say. So does drama draw people in who otherwise perhaps might be hesitant to receive a truth or attend a church service maybe?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's many of the reasons why people will bring me into their church. Specific ministry. It might be seniors, it might be women's, it might just be their church service. In fact, I remember one pastor who invited me to his church in Calgary and asked me to tell the story of John Newton, and which is Amazing Grace, absolutely. And so he's the one who wrote the hymn Amazing Grace, knowing that many people have sung this hymn at funerals, at even just pretty much everywhere, everybody. Even when I go into the jail, there women will sing Amazing Grace because they know at least the first two verses. And so he invited me to come and share, and it was actually during COVID. And this young fellow who had been to church grew up in church, very strict church though, and so he walked away when he was in his later teens. But he had heard that, saw the sign outside their church that this story of John Newton, Amazing Grace, going to be shared at their service. And so he and his wife came, and he's been out of the church for 20 years. And when I told the story of John Newton from his wife's perspective, at the end, the church followed up with him, and he accepted the Lord, and he started coming to Bible studies. And he was just touched that God still loved them, no matter the fact that he'd walked away, and that God's love and his grace was still evident. And he realized it through story.
Wow. Well, that's a really wonderful testimony and feedback of the ministry that you're able to do. So this type of drama that you do, obviously it's unique in that it's a one-person presentation. And I'd like our viewers to take a quick peek at what that's actually like. So let's roll this clip.
That I am no longer Cornelia ten Boom of Haarlem, Holland. No, you see, I am now number 66730. My sister, number 66729. I moved through the line and I dropped the pillowcase of belongings, but I am holding on to the Bible and the bottle of vitamins. And I pray, oh dear Lord Jesus, please protect your precious word. You see, we ten bombs have grown up reading the word of God every day. And I have found within these pages the reality of the world in which we live, but also the hope and strength that I need for every difficulty.
Tell us, what are some of the challenges of doing all this by yourself?
Because I actually research, I spend months researching the history, the time period, the person's story, and not just from one source, but a variety of sources. So that actually is not always necessarily the difficult part. I love that's the creative outlet part that I thrive on. And then learning and my lines, memorizing, performing them, that's something I actually enjoy doing as well. But doing it on your own, see, I don't have to worry about, can someone rehearse? Is it conflicting with your schedule? I determine the schedule and I show up every single time. And so I find it easier in that way. But I always love sharing the tools that I've learned about drama to help other people. And I do something called interactive dramas, where I pull people out of the audience. It's a little different than my one-person dramas, but I've written scripts and I pull people out of the audience and they become part of the story. And so there's a few different things that I do. But just doing something on your own, anyone, whether you're a comedian, a preacher, whatever, it's letting people know. The biggest challenge seems to be letting people know what you do and just getting the word out there. But usually when the church has me once, they'll have me back again. And so that's a good part of it.
Well, that's great. Now, something that piqued my curiosity in what you had just said previously was about being in prisons. So have you been able to perform in front of inmates here in Lethbridge at the prison? And if so, what was that like?
So in 2005, I had done research written with the help of a friend, a 2-act play for a local church here in Lethbridge, and to put on for Christmas. And it was a big event, and it was 40 actors, and it was all the costuming and all the stage. It was a big production. And then afterwards, I thought, wow, like, you know, who's going to go to all this trouble? And I love this story. So I took the story, and it was the story of Elizabeth Fry, prison reformer, from England in the 1800s. And that's the story that we brought to life for this church and community Christmas. But I thought, who's going to go to all that trouble? And I turned it into a one-person drama about Elizabeth Fry, not from her perspective, but from an inmate's perspective, doing all the research and everything again. And then the Lord spoke to me and said, I want you to volunteer at the local correctional center. And I went, what? I mean, you can research and you can perform about something, but actually doing it, that was a stretch. And for 6 months, I dug in my heels and just said, I can't do that. I don't know anything about inmates and prisoners and jail, but the Lord would not let me go. And so finally, I volunteered for a women's program, a women's program called WOW, Women of Worth. And it was back in 2005. Julie Kissick from Streets Alive here in Lethbridge and a number of other women from different churches were already in jail, already going once a week to just share the good news with women and bring chocolate. And
Nice.
So I started there. And so as a result, over the years, I would practice my plays on these women. I would literally dress up and go into this chapel and bring to life these stories of John Newton, Corrie ten Boom, who was in prison herself. And the gospel has been shared over and over with women in a very unique way.
Wow. And so do you have some examples of feedback maybe that you can give us of how you've been able to impact people through this?
So one day I was in Sears, back when Sears actually existed as a department store here in Lethbridge, because I've been volunteering at the jail for over 20 years here, or close to 20 years. So here was this gal, and I was in a clothing department, and this gal kept looking at me through the coat racks, and then she came up to me and she said, did you come into the jail? And I said, yeah. And she says, well, I was part of WOW, like one of the prisoners. And I said, oh, really? She goes, I remember the story you did about that woman in the concentration camp. It was fabulous. And it was like years later. Another example, I was on my way to Red Deer with some friends, and we were going to the youth conference from Lethbridge to Edmonton. Stopped in Red Deer, just at the Tim Hortons, and I went out for a walk and went into this local restaurant, and the woman behind the till, she says, I know you. And she's like being kind of furtive, and I go, what? Yeah, where from? She goes, jail. And I said, oh, are you in WOW? She goes, yes. She said, I remember you guys. And she was out and she was doing well and she was working in her restaurant. And she goes, I just loved the stories that you told. So, yeah. So there's just so many, but not just from jail, from people in churches too. They'll come up to me years later and still remember, how I brought Corrie ten Boom's story to life. So it's just a very vivid visual, like plays and dramas are just very visual. And you usually remember a story. You don't always remember facts, but you can remember a story.
So then let me ask you, how has this ministry changed you?
Oh my gosh, you can't study the lives of people who surrendered their life and served God. And even in that struggle and the things they did and the mess ups they had, but how they experienced God's grace. And you can't but learn from them. They've been my mentors through the years. And I have learned about prayer. I've learned about obedience. I've learned about surrender from the examples of their lives. It has changed me. And then just stepping out of what's comfortable. I could just stay home and just think about doing this. But their examples were for me to step out of what's comfortable and see where God takes you. And that's what I've been doing all these years.
That's great. So if our viewers would like to have you perform at an event or maybe get in touch with you, how can they do that?
I have a website called actingupdrama.ca, and they can contact me through there.
Good. Well, I'm sure that our viewers enjoyed this conversation and will touch base with you. And I, for one, want to thank you so much for being with us today, Deanna.
You're welcome. And thank you for the opportunity to share what I love so much to do.
It was our pleasure. That is Deanna Storfie, and she is with Acting Up Drama here in Lethbridge, Alberta. For all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Michael Clausen. Thanks for watching.